The morning sun shone through the tall glass windows of First National Bank. It was a busy Monday morning in the downtown financial district. People in suits walked quickly on the sidewalks outside, carrying briefcases and coffee cups. Inside, the bank. Employees moved around behind their desks helping customers with their accounts. Ji-won Park pushed open the heavy glass door and stepped inside. She was 24 years old, with dark skin and curly black hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore faded jeans, white sneakers, and a gray hoodie. On her back, she carried an old backpack that had seen better days. The bag was worn at the corners and had a small tear on one side. Ji-won looked around the large lobby. The floor was made of shiny marble that reflected the bright lights above. Tall pillars stood throughout the space. Everything looked expensive and official. She walked toward the main counter where several bank employees sat behind glass windows. At the counter, a woman with short black hair and glasses looked up from her computer screen. Her name tag read, Margaret Chen, Senior Employee. Margaret was 45 years old and had worked at the bank for 15 years. She wore a pressed navy blue suit and pearl earrings. She watched Ji-won approach with a steady gaze. "Good morning," Ji-won said with a friendly smile. "I need to get to the private meeting room on the executive floor. I have an appointment at 10 o'clock. Margaret's eyes moved from Ji-won's face down to her casual clothes and worn backpack. Her lips pressed together in a thin line. "Excuse me?" she said. Her tone was cold. "I have a meeting upstairs," Ji-won repeated. "In the conference room. I'm a bit early, but I wanted to make sure I knew where to go." Margaret leaned back in her chair. "The executive floor is for business meetings only. Are you sure you're in the right place?" She emphasized the words in a way that made it clear she thought Ji-won was confused. Ji-won kept her smile, though it felt a little harder now. "Yes, I'm sure. I'm here for the investor conference at 10. My name is Ji-won Park." "Investor conference?" Margaret repeated. She let out a small laugh that didn't sound friendly. "Miss, the investor conference is for serious business people. Perhaps you have the wrong bank?" Other employees at nearby desks had started to notice the conversation. A young man in a tie glanced over, then quickly looked away. A woman with red hair whispered something to her coworker. Ji-won took a deep breath. She had been through situations like this before. "I understand how it might look," she said calmly, "but I really do have an appointment. If you check your system, you'll see my name on the list." Margaret did not touch her computer. Instead, she crossed her arms. "Our investor meetings are very exclusive. We can't just let anyone walk in off the street claiming they have an appointment. Do you have identification?" "Of course," Ji-won said. She started to reach for her backpack. "Keep your hands where I can see them," Margaret said sharply. Her voice was loud enough that several customers in the lobby turned to look. Ji-won froze. Her heart started beating faster. "I was just getting my ID," she explained quietly. "I need to call security," Margaret announced. She picked up her desk phone without taking her eyes off Ji-won. "We have a situation at the main counter." "This really isn't necessary," Ji-won said. She could feel people staring at her now. Heat rose in her cheeks, but she kept her voice steady. "If you just check the appointment list. Security to the main counter, please," Margaret said into the phone. "We have a suspicious person trying to access restricted areas." The words suspicious person echoed in Ji-won's ears. She had heard those words before, in different places, different situations. Always when she was just trying to exist in spaces where people didn't expect to see someone who looked like her. A heavy-set security guard appeared from a side hallway. His name tag said James Rodriguez. He walked toward the counter with his hand resting on his belt. "What's the problem here?" he asked. Margaret pointed at Ji-won. "This young woman is claiming she has an appointment on the executive floor. She's asking about our private investor conference." Officer Rodriguez looked at Ji-won. His expression was neutral, not unkind, but professional. "Miss, can you explain why you're here?" "I'm here for a business meeting," Ji-won said. She spoke clearly and slowly. "I have an appointment at 10 o'clock in the executive conference room. My name is Ji-won Park. I'm one of the investors." The security guard glanced at Margaret, then back at Ji-won. Do you have any proof of this appointment? Yes, on my phone, Ji-won said. May I take it out of my pocket? Slowly, Officer Rodriguez said. Ji-won carefully pulled her phone from her hoodie pocket. She unlocked it and opened her email app. Here, she said, holding the screen toward them. This is the confirmation email from the bank. It has the time, date, and room number. Margaret barely glanced at the phone. Anyone can fake an email, she said dismissively. Officer Rodriguez, I think it's best if she leaves the premises. More customers had gathered at a distance watching the scene unfold. Some held up their phones, recording. Ji-won noticed the cameras pointed at her. She felt a familiar mix of frustration and exhaustion. I'm not leaving, Ji-won said firmly. I have a legitimate appointment. Other people are waiting for me upstairs. Are you refusing to cooperate with security? Margaret asked. Her voice got louder. Because that's a serious matter. Before Ji-won could respond, a door on the far side of the lobby opened. A tall man in an expensive gray suit hurried out. He looked stressed, checking his watch repeatedly. His name was Daniel Kim, the branch manager. He was supposed to be upstairs preparing for the most important investor meeting of his career. Daniel had been expecting this morning to go perfectly. 5 investors were coming to discuss a major project. But the main investor, the one with the biggest stake, hadn't arrived yet. He was getting worried. Now there was some kind of commotion in the lobby, and he needed to deal with it quickly. What's going on here? Daniel asked, walking briskly toward the counter. Margaret, why are you on the phone with security? We have important guests arriving. Margaret straightened her suit jacket. Mr. Kim, I caught this person trying to scam her way upstairs. She claims she's here for the investor conference. Daniel looked at Ji-won for the first time. He saw a young black woman in casual clothes with a backpack. He frowned slightly, confused. The investor conference? He repeated. Yes, Ji-won said. She met his eyes directly. I'm Ji-won Park. The name sounded familiar to Daniel. He had been emailing someone named Ji-won Park for 6 months. But the photo in his files showed a woman in a formal business suit with her hair styled professionally. He looked at this young woman in a hoodie and couldn't make the connection. Ji-won Park is one of our investors, Daniel said slowly. He pulled out his tablet from under his arm. But... He trailed off, looking uncertain. See? Margaret said triumphantly. This is clearly not the right person. She's probably using a stolen identity. Ji-won closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, she looked tired. I can prove who I am, she said. But first, can someone explain why I'm being treated? Like a criminal for wearing jeans to a meeting? The lobby had gone very quiet. Everyone was watching now. Daniel's phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at it and saw a text from his assistant upstairs. Where is Ms. Park? Other investors are getting impatient. His stomach dropped. He looked at Ji-won again, really looked at her this time. Could this really be the brilliant tech entrepreneur he'd been courting? The woman whose company was about to invest $50 million in his bank? Mr. Kim, Margaret said, I really think we should have her removed. This is clearly some kind of mistake or worse. Daniel's hands shook slightly as he scrolled through his tablet, searching for Ji-won Park's file. He needed to figure this out, and he needed to figure it out right now. Daniel's fingers moved quickly across his tablet screen. He found the file marked Park Ji-won Next Gen Solutions. His eyes scanned the information. Age 24. Company value $200 million. Investment amount $50 million. He looked at the professional photo attached to the file, then looked at Ji-won standing in front of him. The woman in the photo wore a black business suit with her hair in a neat bun. She stood in front of a modern office building with glass walls. But the face was the same. The eyes were the same. This was Ji-won Park. Daniel's face went pale. His mouth opened, but no words came out for a moment. Ms. Park, he finally said, his voice weak. I'm so sorry. I didn't recognize you from your photo. Margaret's confident expression began to crack. What? She said. Mr. Kim, surely you're not saying, "This is Ji-won Park," Daniel said firmly, cutting her off. "She's the primary investor for our expansion project. She's the person we've been waiting for." The lobby seemed to freeze. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Margaret's face went from pink to white in seconds. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Officer Rodriguez took a step back. "I apologize, ma'am," he said to Ji-won. "There's been a misunderstanding." Ji-won didn't smile. She didn't look angry either. She just looked tired. "A misunderstanding," she repeated quietly. Other bank employees who had been watching started to move away from the counter. Some looked embarrassed. Others pretended they had never been watching at all. Ji-won noticed several people quickly putting their phones away. She had seen at least 3 people recording the whole thing. "Ms. Park, please let me escort you upstairs," Daniel said. He was sweating now despite the cool air conditioning. "The other investors are waiting." "I'm so sorry about this confusion." "Confusion," Ji-won said. The word hung in the air. Margaret tried to speak. "I was just following security protocols. We have to be careful about who accesses the executive floor. It's nothing personal, Nothing personal," Ji-won interrupted. She looked directly at Margaret. "Tell me, Mrs. Chen, how many other people did you stop this morning?" Margaret blinked. "What? How many other people did you question when they asked for directions?" Ji-won asked. Her voice was calm, but her words cut like knives. "That man in the khakis and polo shirt who came in 15 minutes before me. Did you call security on him?" Margaret's face flushed red. "That's different. He looked like—" She stopped herself. "He looked like what?" Ji-won asked. She waited. The silence was heavy. Daniel stepped forward, trying to save the situation. "Ms. Park, please let's go upstairs. We really should start the meeting." But Ji-won didn't move. "I saw him," she continued, still looking at Margaret. "He was wearing casual clothes too. He asked the employee at desk 3 about the executive floor." She smiled and gave him directions. No questions. No security. No drama. Margaret opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her hands gripped the edge of her desk. "I know what this is," Ji-won said. Her voice stayed steady, but there was pain behind it. "I've dealt with it my whole life. In stores, in restaurants, in airports. And now in banks. You took one look at me and decided I was a threat. You didn't see a businesswoman. You didn't see an investor. You saw my skin color and my clothes and you made up your mind." "That's not true," Margaret protested weakly. "I treat everyone the same. Do you?" Ji-won asked. "Then why didn't you look at my phone when I tried to show you the confirmation email? Why didn't you check your computer for my name? You didn't want to see evidence that you were wrong. You wanted me to be suspicious so your assumptions would be right." A few customers in the lobby nodded. Others looked uncomfortable. Daniel stood between them, not knowing what to do. His career flashed before his eyes. 6 months of work to get Ji-won Park to invest. 6 months of calls and emails and presentations. And now this. Officer Rodriguez cleared his throat. "Ms. Park, again, I apologize. I was just responding to a call. If you had known I was rich," Ji-won finished for him, "then I would deserve respect. But when you thought I was just a regular person in a hoodie, it was okay to treat me like a criminal." The security guard looked at his shoes. Ji-won's phone rang. The sound made everyone jump. She looked at the screen. "Excuse me," she said. She answered the call. "Hello, Sarah." A woman's voice came through the phone, loud enough for the people nearby to hear. "Ji-won, where are you?" The meeting was supposed to start 10 minutes ago. "Mr. Choi and Ms. Martinez are getting restless." "I'm in the lobby," Ji-won said. "I've been delayed. Is everything okay?" her assistant asked. "Not exactly," Ji-won said. She kept her eyes on Margaret. "There was a situation, but I'm about to head up now." "A situation?" Sarah sounded concerned. "Do you need me to come down?" "No, it's fine. Tell everyone I'll be there in 5 minutes." Ji-won ended the call and put her phone back in her pocket. Daniel looked relieved. "Yes, let's go upstairs, Ms. Park, if you'll follow me. I'm not going anywhere yet," Ji-won said. Daniel's relief disappeared. "But the meeting can wait 5 more minutes," Ji-won said firmly. She turned back to Margaret. "Mrs. Chen, do you know how hard it was to get here?" Margaret shook her head slightly. "I started my first company when I was 19, Ji-won said. "I had an idea for better banking security software. I went to 43 banks trying to get someone to listen to me. You know what happened? 38 of them wouldn't even give me a meeting. They saw a teenager and decided I wasn't worth their time. The 5 who met with me talked to me like I was a child. They asked where my parents were. They asked if I was doing a school project. She paused. People were listening now, really listening. I built the company anyway, Jiwon continued. I found investors who saw past my age and my appearance. People who judged me on my ideas, not my skin. It took 5 years of 16-hour days. 5 years of people doubting me. 5 years of walking into rooms and watching faces fall when they saw who I was. And now my company is worth $200 million. I have contracts with 3 of the biggest banks in the country, and I came here today to give First National a chance. Daniel was sweating more now. We are so grateful for that chance, Ms. Park. This incident doesn't represent our values, doesn't it? Jiwon asked. Mrs. Chen works here. She's a senior employee. That means she's been here a long time. That means she's trained other employees. How many of them think like she does? How many young people like me have walked through these doors and been treated the same way? Margaret finally found her voice. I made a mistake, she said. The words came out rough. I'm sorry. I should have checked. I should have listened. I was wrong. You were wrong, Jiwon agreed. But sorry doesn't fix the problem. Sorry doesn't change the fact that this happens every single day to people who don't have $50 million to invest. What happens to them? They just get thrown out and everyone moves on? Nobody answered. The lobby was so quiet that the sound of the air conditioning seemed loud. Daniel wrung his hands. Miss Park, I promise you we will address this. Mrs. Chen will face consequences for her actions. This is not acceptable behavior. What kind of consequences? Jiwon asked. I'll have to discuss it with HR, Daniel said. But I can assure you appropriate action will be taken. Margaret's eyes widened. Mr. Kim, please, I've worked here for 15 years. I've never had a complaint before. I have a family to support. You should have thought of that before you profiled someone, Daniel snapped. He was angry now. Angry at Margaret for ruining his deal. Angry at himself for not recognizing Jiwon sooner. Jiwon watched Margaret's face crumble. The older woman looked terrified. For a moment, Jiwon saw something familiar in her expression. Fear. The same fear Jiwon had felt standing at this counter 10 minutes ago, being accused of lying, being treated like she didn't belong. Mr. Kim, Jiwon said slowly. Don't fire her! Both Daniel and Margaret looked at Jiwon in shock. What? Daniel said. Don't fire her, Jiwon repeated. She looked at Margaret. Firing her is easy. It makes the problem go away for you. But it doesn't fix anything. She loses her job, you hire someone new, and maybe that person has the same biases. Maybe they're just better at hiding them. Nothing changes, Daniel didn't understand. But Ms. Park, after what she did was wrong, Jiwon said. Very wrong. But I don't think destroying her life is the answer. She paused, thinking. I have a different idea. But first, I need to get to this meeting. The other investors are waiting, and I actually do have a business proposal to present. She adjusted her backpack and looked at Daniel. Shall we? Daniel nodded quickly, eager to move past this disaster. Yes, of course. Please follow me. As they walked toward the elevator, Jiwon glanced back at Margaret. The older woman stood behind her desk looking confused and frightened. Officer Rodriguez had walked away. The customers were going back to their business. Jiwon wondered if Margaret would learn anything from this. She wondered if she herself was making the right choice. But she knew one thing for certain. Punishment without education never changed anyone's mind. It just made them resentful. The elevator doors opened. Daniel gestured for Jiwon to enter first. As the doors closed, Jiwon caught one last glimpse of Margaret, still standing at her desk watching them go. The elevator climbed smoothly to the 10th floor. Daniel stood next to Jiwon, his hands clasped together nervously. He kept opening his mouth as if to speak, then closing it again. The silence felt thick and uncomfortable. Ms. Park, he finally said, I truly cannot apologize enough for what happened downstairs. Jiwon watched the floor numbers light up one by one. How long has Mrs. Chen worked here? 15 years, Daniel answered. She's been a solid employee. Never had any complaints before today. No complaints that were filed, Jiwon corrected him. That's different from no complaints existing. Daniel fell silent again. The elevator reached the 10th floor and the doors opened with a soft sound. They stepped out into a hallway with thick carpet and expensive artwork on the walls. Everything here looked professional and polished, very different from the busy lobby downstairs. "The conference room is this way," Daniel said, leading her down the hall. His voice was still nervous. "The other investors arrived about 30 minutes ago. I've been stalling them, saying you were caught in traffic." "That's one way to put it," Jiwon said. They reached a large wooden door. Through the frosted glass, Jiwon could see shapes of people sitting around a table. Daniel paused with his hand on the door handle. "Ms. Park, please," he said quietly. "Whatever happened downstairs, I hope it won't affect your decision about the investment. This project means everything to First National. We've been planning it for 2 years." Jiwon looked at him. "Mr. Kim, do you know what my company does?" "You develop security software for banks," Daniel said. "Your AI system has reduced fraud by 60% at the institutions using it." "That's right," Jiwon said. "But do you know why I started the company?" Daniel shook his head. "When I was 19, my mother's bank account was hacked," Jiwon explained. "Someone stole her entire savings. She's a nurse. She worked night shifts for 20 years to save that money. The bank took 3 months to investigate. They treated her like she was stupid for getting hacked. They made her feel small. Eventually, they gave her money back, but the way they treated her stayed with me." She looked at the door to the conference room. "I built my company because I wanted to protect people like my mother. People who work hard and trust banks with their money. But I also wanted to change how banks treat regular people, because security isn't just about computer systems. It's also about respecting the humans who walk through your doors." Daniel listened carefully. He was beginning to understand. "What happened downstairs today?" Jiwon continued. "That's a security problem too. Maybe not the kind you can fix with software, but it's a problem that costs banks' customers. It costs them trust, and trust is everything in banking." "You're absolutely right," Daniel said. Jiwon nodded toward the door. "Let's go meet the others." Daniel opened the door and they walked in. The conference room was large with windows that overlooked the city. A long table sat in the center, surrounded by leather chairs. 5 people sat around the table, all looking up as Jiwon entered. "Everyone, this is Jiwon Park from Next Gen Solutions," Daniel announced, trying to sound cheerful despite his earlier panic. The investors stood up. Jiwon recognized them from their files. Mr. Choi was in his 60s, wearing a traditional business suit. He ran a venture capital firm. Ms. Martinez was in her 40s, dressed in a sharp red blazer. She represented a tech investment group. There were 3 others, all established players in the financial world. They all stared at Jiwon. She could see the surprise on their faces. They had been expecting someone older, someone in formal business clothes, someone who looked different. "Ms. Park," Mr. Choi said, recovering first. He reached out to shake her hand. "We were worried something had happened to you." "Something did," Jiwon said, shaking his hand firmly. "But I'm here now." Ms. Martinez smiled, though it looked forced. "We were just discussing the timeline for the technology rollout." "Daniel mentioned you have the primary stake in this project." "That's correct," Jiwon said. She took off her backpack and pulled out a laptop. "My company is prepared to invest $50 million in the bank's digital infrastructure upgrade. But I have some conditions that weren't in the original proposal." The other investors exchanged glances. Daniel's expression turned worried again. Jiwon set up her laptop and connected it to the large screen on the wall. "Before we get to those conditions, let me show you what Next Gen Solutions can do." For the next 40 minutes, Jiwon delivered her presentation. She showed them how her AI security system worked. She explained how it could detect fraud patterns that human analysts missed. She presented case studies from the 3 banks already using her technology. The numbers were impressive. Fraud down by 60%, customer satisfaction up by 40%, operating costs reduced by 25%. As she spoke, she watched the other investors' faces change. The surprise faded. Interest took its place. She saw them leaning forward, asking questions, taking notes. They stopped seeing a young woman in casual clothes. They started seeing a brilliant business person who knew her field better than anyone else in the room. "This is remarkable," Mr. Choi said when she finished. "Your system is far more advanced than I realized." "It's not just about technology," Jiwon explained. "It's about understanding human behavior. Most security breaches happen because of human error or human bias. The system I designed accounts for both." "Human bias?" Ms. Martinez asked. "Can you explain that?" Jiwon paused. This was the moment. "Yes," she said. "Actually, that brings me to the conditions I mentioned earlier. The room went quiet. Daniel gripped his pen tightly. I experienced something this morning that made me reconsider this investment, Ji-won said. She spoke calmly, but her words carried weight. When I arrived at the bank, I was treated as a threat. Security was called on me. I was accused of lying and attempting fraud, all because I was wearing jeans and carrying an old backpack. The other investors looked shocked. Daniel's face went red. That's outrageous, Mr. Choi said. Daniel, what happened? Daniel started to speak, but Ji-won held up her hand. What happened was unconscious bias, she said. One employee made assumptions based on my appearance. She didn't see a businesswoman. She saw someone who looked out of place, and she acted on that assumption. That employee should be fired immediately, Ms. Martinez said firmly. That's what Mr. Kim suggested, Ji-won said. But I don't think that solves the real problem. Firing one person is easy. Changing a culture is hard, and that's what needs to happen at First National. She clicked to the next slide on her presentation. It showed statistics about diversity in banking. The numbers were not good. Black business owners were 3 times more likely to be denied loans than white business owners with the same credit scores. Young entrepreneurs reported feeling disrespected and dismissed by bank employees. Customer satisfaction was lowest among minority communities. This is an industry-wide problem, Ji-won said, but it's also an opportunity. The bank that figures out how to serve all communities equally will gain millions of new customers. They'll build trust. They'll grow. What are you proposing? Mr. Choi asked. Ji-won clicked to her final slide. I'll invest the $50 million as planned. But I have 3 conditions. First, every employee at First National must complete mandatory bias training, not just watching a video. Real training with exercises and accountability. Daniel nodded quickly. That can be arranged. Second, Ji-won continued, the bank will partner with community organizations that support young entrepreneurs from underrepresented backgrounds. You'll provide free financial education and small business resources. That's an excellent idea, Ms. Martinez said, making notes. And third, Ji-won said, looking directly at Daniel, the employee who called security on me this morning will lead the diversity initiative. The room erupted. Everyone started talking at once. That's crazy, one investor said. Why would you trust her? Another asked. Daniel looked like he might faint. Ms. Park, I'm not sure that's wise. Ji-won waited for the noise to settle. I've thought about it carefully. Firing her makes me feel better for about 5 minutes. But then what? She goes to another bank and treats someone else the same way. She never learns. She never changes. And First National hires someone new who might have the same biases. But why put her in charge of diversity? Mr. Choi asked. It seems like a reward for bad behavior. It's not a reward, Ji-won said. It's an education. She'll have to research bias, study it, talk to people affected by it, lead workshops about it. By the time she's done, she'll understand discrimination from the inside. And maybe, just maybe, she'll become the best person to teach others because she'll remember what it felt like to be the problem. The room was quiet now. The investors were thinking about her words. Ms. Martinez spoke first. It's unconventional, she admitted. But I see the logic. Restorative justice instead of punishment. Exactly, Ji-won said. Change doesn't happen through fear. It happens through understanding. Daniel cleared his throat. Ms. Park, if we agree to these conditions, you'll move forward with the full investment? Yes, Ji-won confirmed. $50 million for the technology upgrade, plus an additional $5 million for the diversity program. $5 million. Daniel's eyes widened. That's generous. It's necessary, Ji-won said. If you're going to do this right, you need resources. Training costs money. Community partnerships cost money. And the person leading it needs support and time. Mr. Choi stood up. I think it's brilliant. In fact, I'd like to add another $2 million from my fund specifically for the community partnership program. I'll match that, Ms. Martinez said. One by one, the other investors agreed. They saw what Ji-won saw, an opportunity to not just upgrade technology, but to transform how the bank operated. Daniel looked overwhelmed, but happy. This is incredible. Ms. Park, your vision goes far beyond what we initially proposed. Good vision should, Ji-won said with a small smile. So do we have a deal? We have a deal, Daniel said. He reached out to shake her hand. Thank you for giving us this chance. And thank you for not letting one employee's mistake destroy months of work. They shook hands. The other investors applauded. Ji-won felt the tension from the morning finally start to ease. This was the right decision. She could feel it. Now, Daniel said, I need to go downstairs and talk to Mrs. Chen. This is going to be quite a conversation. I'd like to be there, Ji-won said. Are you sure? Daniel asked. I'm sure, Ji-won said. She needs to hear this from both of us. Margaret sat at her desk with her hands folded in her lap. She had not moved much since Ji-won and Daniel went upstairs an hour ago. Other employees walked past her station, but nobody spoke to her. Word had spread quickly through the bank about what happened. Some people gave her sympathetic looks. Others looked away when she tried to make eye contact. Her computer screen was on, but she stared past it. Her mind kept replaying the scene from earlier. The young woman's face. Her calm voice asking questions that Margaret could not answer. The cameras recording everything. Margaret's 15 years at the bank suddenly felt very fragile. She had called her husband during her break. I think I'm going to lose my job, she told him. What happened? He asked, concerned. I made a terrible mistake, she said. She explained the situation, her voice shaking. As she spoke the words out loud, she heard how bad it sounded. How obviously wrong she had been. Maybe it's not as bad as you think, her husband tried to comfort her. But they both knew better. Now Margaret waited. That was all she could do. Wait for Daniel to come back down and fire her. Wait for security to escort her out. Wait for her career to end in shame. The elevator doors opened. Daniel stepped out and Margaret's heart dropped. But then she saw Ji-won walking beside him. The young woman was still wearing her jeans and hoodie. She looked calm and confident. Margaret felt sick to her stomach. They walked across the lobby toward her desk. Other employees suddenly found reasons to be busy with their computers. Nobody wanted to witness what was about to happen. Mrs. Chen, Daniel said as they reached her station, we need to talk. Please come to my office. Margaret stood up on shaky legs. Yes, sir. The three of them walked to Daniel's office in silence. It was a corner office with windows overlooking the street. Daniel's desk was neat and organized. Diplomas hung on the wall. Margaret had been in this office many times over the years, usually for good reasons. Performance reviews, promotions, commendations. This time was different. Daniel sat behind his desk. Ji-won took one of the chairs facing him. Margaret remained standing. Sit down, Mrs. Chen, Daniel said. Margaret sat in the chair next to Ji-won. She kept her eyes on Daniel, unable to look at the young woman beside her. Daniel folded his hands on his desk. Mrs. Chen, what you did this morning was completely unacceptable. You profiled a customer based on her appearance. You refused to check basic facts. You called security on someone who had a legitimate appointment. Do you understand how serious this is? Yes, sir, Margaret whispered. This kind of behavior violates every principle First National claims to stand for, Daniel continued. It's discriminatory. It's unprofessional. And it nearly cost us the most important business deal this branch has ever had. Margaret's hands twisted in her lap. I'm sorry, she said. Her voice cracked. I was just trying to protect the bank. We get so many people trying to scam us. Stop, Ji-won said quietly. Margaret finally looked at her. The young woman's face was serious but not angry. Don't hide behind excuses, Ji-won said. You weren't protecting the bank. You were acting on assumptions. Be honest about that. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. You're right, she said. I saw you and I assumed. I didn't even think. I just reacted. Why? Ji-won asked. What made you react that way? Margaret struggled to answer. I don't know, she said finally. Yes, you do, Ji-won said firmly. You might not want to admit it, but you know. Silence filled the office. Margaret felt exposed, like all her hidden thoughts were visible. Finally, she spoke. You looked different from the people we usually see at investor meetings. You were young. You were dressed casually, and... She paused. And I'm black, Ji-won finished for her. Margaret flinched at the words but nodded. Yes, she admitted. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't think I was racist. I never thought of myself that way. I have black friends. I voted for Obama. I donate to charities. But when you walked in, something in my brain just decided you were trouble. I'm disgusted with myself. The admission hung in the air. Daniel looked uncomfortable. Ji-won watched Margaret carefully. At least you're being honest now, Ji-won said. That's more than most people do. For what it's worth, Margaret said, wiping her eyes. I understand if you want me fired. I deserve it. What I did was wrong. There's no excuse. You're right, Daniel said. There is no excuse. Which is why I've decided to not fire her, Ji-won interrupted. Margaret's head snapped up. What? Daniel looked at Ji-won and nodded. Ms. Park has made a very generous offer, Mrs. Chen. She's willing to give you a second chance. But it comes with conditions. Margaret looked between them, confused. I don't understand. Ji-won leaned forward. The meeting upstairs went well. I'm investing $55 million in First National. Part of that money will fund a new diversity and inclusion initiative. The bank will implement bias training for all employees. They'll partner with community organizations to support young entrepreneurs. They'll work to become a bank that serves everyone equally, not just the people who look a certain way. That's wonderful, Margaret said, still confused about why she was hearing this. You're going to lead that initiative, Ji-won said. Margaret stared at her. What? No, I can't. I'm the last person who should. You're exactly the right person, Ji-won said. Because you understand the problem now. You've felt how ugly it is to realize you have biases you didn't know about. That understanding is valuable. But I don't know anything about diversity training, Margaret protested. Then you'll learn, Ji-won said simply. You'll research it, study it, talk to experts, interview people who have experienced discrimination, develop programs, lead workshops. And in doing that, you'll change. You'll grow. And hopefully, you'll help others change too. Margaret shook her head. Miss Park, I don't deserve this kindness. I treated you terribly. This isn't kindness, Ji-won said. It's strategy. Firing you would be easy. It would make me feel better for a moment. But it wouldn't fix anything. You'd go somewhere else and maybe make the same mistakes. And this bank would hire someone new who might have the same biases. Nothing would change. She paused, looking directly at Margaret. But if you do this job, if you really commit to it, you could change things. You could help make sure what happened to me this morning never happens to anyone else. That's worth more than revenge. Margaret felt tears running down her face now. She had expected to be fired. She had expected to be shamed and kicked out. Instead, this young woman she had wronged was offering her a chance to make things right. It felt impossible. I don't know what to say, Margaret whispered. Say you'll do it, Ji-won said. Say you'll put in the work. Because this won't be easy. You'll have to face uncomfortable truths. You'll have to admit you were wrong to a lot of people. You'll have to change the way you think. Are you willing to do that? Margaret thought about her husband, her 2 kids in college, her 15 years at the bank, her comfortable life where she never had to think too hard about these issues. She thought about how easy it would be to just quit, find a new job, forget this ever happened. But she also thought about Ji-won's face in the lobby, the tiredness in her eyes, the way she said, I've dealt with it my whole life. The understanding that this was not just about one bad moment. It was about a pattern that happened every day to people like Ji-won. Yes, Margaret said firmly. I'll do it. I'll do whatever it takes, Daniel nodded approvingly. Good. This will be your primary responsibility for the next year. We'll reduce your other duties. You'll report directly to me and to Ms. Park on your progress. I'll also connect you with some resources, Ji-won added. Consultants who specialize in this work. Organizations that run effective diversity programs. It's important that you learn from people who have been doing this for years. Thank you, Margaret said. She looked at Ji-won with genuine gratitude. I know I don't deserve this chance, but I promise I won't waste it. I'll work harder than I've ever worked. I'll make this right. Don't thank me yet, Ji-won said. This is going to be difficult. You're going to hear things that make you uncomfortable. You're going to have to examine parts of yourself you've probably never looked at before. Some days you're going to want to quit. I won't quit, Margaret said. We'll see, Ji-won said. But there was something almost like warmth in her voice. You should know that this initiative will be public. The bank is going to announce it. Your name will be attached to it. Some people will support you. Others will criticize you. Can you handle that? Margaret thought about it. Her name in the news. People at her church asking questions. Friends having opinions. It sounded terrifying. But she thought about how Ji-won handled the situation in the lobby. With dignity. With strength. If that young woman could face discrimination with such grace, Margaret could face some criticism for trying to fix her mistakes. Yes, Margaret said. I can handle it. Daniel pulled out a folder from his desk drawer. I've prepared some preliminary information about what this role will entail. Your salary will remain the same. You'll have a budget for training materials and programs. You'll have administrative support. Ms. Park has also arranged for you to visit 3 companies that have successful diversity initiatives. You'll learn from their experiences. He slid the folder across the desk to Margaret. She opened it and saw pages of information. Goals, timelines, resources. It was real. This was actually happening. When do I start? Margaret asked. Today, Ji-won said. Right now. Your first task is to write a statement about what happened this morning. Be honest, explain what you did wrong and why. Explain what you learned. That statement will be part of the bank's announcement about the new initiative. Margaret's stomach dropped. You want me to publicly admit what I did? Yes, Ji-won said. Because real change requires accountability. You can't teach others about bias if you're not willing to be honest about your own. People need to see that it's possible to make mistakes and grow from them. Margaret took a deep breath. This was going to be the hardest thing she had ever done. But maybe that was the point. Easy lessons were forgotten quickly. Hard lessons changed people. Okay, she said. I'll write it. Ji-won stood up. I need to get back to my office. I have meetings this afternoon. But Mrs. Chen, I want you to know something. Margaret stood up as well, looking at the younger woman. I believe people can change, Ji-won said. I believe you can change. That's why I'm giving you this chance. Don't prove me wrong. I won't, Margaret promised. I swear I won't. Ji-won nodded and headed for the door. Before she left, she turned back. Oh, and Mrs. Chen, next time you see someone who looks different from what you expect, pause. Take a breath. Ask yourself why you're reacting the way you are. That pause might save someone from feeling what I felt this morning. I will, Margaret said. I promise. After Ji-won left, Margaret sat back down in the chair. She looked at the folder in her hands. A year ago, she would have been terrified of this assignment. Today, she felt something different. Nervous, yes. Scared, definitely. But also determined, and maybe, just maybe, hopeful. Daniel cleared his throat. Mrs. Chen, I want to be clear. Ms. Park might believe in second chances, but I'll be watching your progress closely. If you don't take this seriously, if you don't put in the work, there will be consequences. I understand, sir, Margaret said. You won't be disappointed. She stood up, clutching the folder. As she walked back to her desk, she felt like she was walking into a new life. The comfortable certainty of her old world was gone. Ahead was uncertainty and challenge and the hard work of changing herself. But somewhere in her chest, under the fear and shame, was a small seed of something else. Purpose. For the first time in years, her job would mean something more than just processing transactions. She would help people. She would make things better. She would prove that even someone who made a terrible mistake could learn and grow. Margaret sat down at her desk and opened her computer. She created a new document and titled it Statement of Accountability. Then she began to write. 3 months had passed since that difficult morning in the bank lobby. The leaves outside First National Bank had changed from green to gold and red. The air was cooler now. Inside the bank, things had changed too, though the changes were not as visible as autumn leaves. Margaret Chen walked through the main entrance carrying a box of materials for today's training session. She wore a navy blazer and comfortable shoes. Her hair had a few more gray strands than before. The past 3 months had been exhausting, but she looked different. Calmer somehow. More purposeful. Good morning, Mrs. Chen, the security guard said. It was Officer Rodriguez, the same man who had responded to her call 3 months ago. Their relationship had been awkward at first, but they had both participated in the bias training. They had both learned uncomfortable truths about themselves. Good morning, James, Margaret replied with a genuine smile. Ready for today's session? As ready as I'll ever be, he said. These trainings make my brain hurt, but in a good way. Margaret laughed. I know exactly what you mean. She headed to the conference room on the second floor. It was set up with chairs in a circle and a projector screen. Today was the 5th training session for bank employees. They had already completed sessions on recognizing unconscious bias, understanding privilege, and effective communication across differences. Today's topic was creating inclusive customer service. 40 employees filed into the room over the next 10 minutes. Some looked interested. Others looked tired, like they would rather be doing their regular jobs. Margaret understood. 3 months ago, she would have felt the same way. She would have seen this training as a waste of time, something to check off a list. Now she knew better. "Good morning, everyone," Margaret said once everyone was seated. "Thank you for being here. I know some of you are thinking you could be getting real work done instead of sitting through another training session." A few people smiled, caught off guard by her honesty. "I used to think the same thing," Margaret admitted. "I thought diversity training was just corporate talk, something companies did to look good. I didn't think it had anything to do with me." She paused, looking around the room. "Then I made a terrible mistake. Some of you know about it. Some of you were there when it happened. I treated a customer badly because of how she looked. I made assumptions. I called security on her, and it turned out she was one of the most important investors our bank had ever seen." The room was quiet. Everyone was listening now. "But here's the thing," Margaret continued. "The money wasn't what mattered. What mattered was that I made a young woman feel unsafe and unwelcome in a place where she had every right to be. I caused harm, and I didn't even realize I was doing it until it was too late." She clicked to the first slide of her presentation. It showed a simple question: who belongs here? "That's what we're going to explore today," Margaret said. "Who do we think belongs in our bank? Who do we assume is a valuable customer? And who do we treat with suspicion? These assumptions affect every interaction we have." Over the next 2 hours, Margaret led the group through exercises and discussions. She showed videos of real customer interactions where bias played a role. She asked employees to examine their own reactions to different scenarios. She shared research about how businesses lost customers because of discriminatory treatment. The conversation got uncomfortable at times. One older employee insisted he treated everyone the same. Margaret gently challenged him with specific examples. Another employee shared a story about being followed in stores because of his race. The room got very quiet as he spoke. "This is what we're trying to prevent," Margaret said after he finished. "We're trying to make sure nobody feels that way when they walk into First National Bank." By the end of the session, even the skeptical employees seemed thoughtful. They left the room talking quietly among themselves. Margaret packed up her materials, feeling tired but satisfied. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Jiwon. "How did today's training go?" Margaret smiled and typed back, "Better than I expected. People are actually engaging with the material." "Good," Jiwon replied. "Are we still on for our check-in meeting tomorrow?" "Yes, 2 o'clock. I'll have the monthly report ready." Margaret had learned to report to Jiwon regularly. At first, it had felt strange to answer to someone who was not even a bank employee. But Jiwon's insights had been invaluable. She understood the work in ways that Margaret was still learning. The next afternoon, Margaret sat in a coffee shop across from the bank. She had spread papers across the table, reviewing her progress report. The door opened and Jiwon walked in. She was dressed more formally today in slacks and a blazer, but she still carried the same worn backpack. "Hi, Mrs. Chen," Jiwon said, sitting down across from her. "Please call me Margaret," she said. They had been working together for 3 months, but Jiwon still used her formal title. "Margaret, then," Jiwon said with a small smile. "How are things going?" Margaret slid the report across the table. "We've completed 5 training sessions with 80% of staff. Customer satisfaction surveys show a 15% improvement in how minority customers rate their experiences. We've partnered with 3 community organizations, and we've provided free financial education workshops to 50 young entrepreneurs." Jiwon scanned the report, nodding. "These are good numbers, but tell me what's not in the report. How are people really responding?" Margaret appreciated that Jiwon always asked the deeper questions. "Mixed," she admitted. "Some employees have really embraced the changes. They're more aware. They catch themselves making assumptions, but others are resistant. They think this is just political correctness. They do the training because they have to, not because they want to." "That's normal," Jiwon said. "Change is slow. The important thing is that you're creating a foundation. The people who embrace it will influence others over time." "I hope so," Margaret said. She hesitated, then added, "I visited one of the community organizations last week, the Youth Entrepreneurship Center on the East Side." "How was it?" Jiwon asked. "Eye-opening," Margaret said. "I met a 16-year-old girl who wants to start a catering business. She has a solid plan, a small amount of savings, and big dreams. But she told me that every time she walks into a bank, employees treat her like she's wasting their time." Margaret's voice caught slightly. "She reminded me of you, young, full of potential, and facing doors that keep closing because people make assumptions. Jiwon was quiet for a moment. Did you help her? I'm trying, Margaret said. I connected her with one of our small business advisors who specializes in startup loans. We're working on a program specifically for young entrepreneurs who don't have traditional credentials, but have solid business plans. That's great work, Margaret, Jiwon said. She meant it. She could see how much the older woman had changed. The defensive, scared person from 3 months ago was becoming someone who genuinely cared about making a difference. I've been thinking about something, Margaret said. I owe you an apology that I never properly gave. You've apologized many times, Jiwon said. Not the right way, Margaret insisted. I said I was sorry. I admitted I was wrong. But I don't think I ever told you how much I hurt you. I don't think I fully understood it until I started this work. She looked down at her coffee. I've been reading stories and listening to people share their experiences. Every story is different, but there's this common thread. The exhaustion, the constant need to prove yourself. The way small moments of discrimination add up over time until they become this heavy weight you're always carrying. Margaret looked up at Jiwon. You came to the bank that morning probably already tired from dealing with this kind of thing your whole life. And instead of being a place where you were respected and valued, I made it one more place where you had to fight to be seen as human. That's what I'm truly sorry for. Not just for the incident, but for adding to that weight. Jiwon felt unexpected emotion rising in her chest. In 3 months of working together, this was the first time Margaret had really articulated understanding. Thank you, she said quietly. That means a lot. They sat in silence for a moment, two women who had started as adversaries and were slowly becoming something like allies. Can I ask you something? Margaret said. Why did you really give me this chance? The real reason. Jiwon thought about it. When I was building my company, I made mistakes too. Different mistakes than yours, but mistakes. I hired the wrong people. I trusted the wrong partners. I lost money. Every time someone gave me a chance to learn and do better. If they had just punished me and moved on, I would never have grown. She took a sip of her coffee. I also think the world has enough pain in it. Causing more pain, even when it feels justified, doesn't actually make things better. I wanted to see if change was possible. If someone who made a mistake could become part of the solution. Am I part of the solution? Margaret asked. She sounded genuinely uncertain. You're getting there, Jiwon said. 3 months ago, you didn't understand why what you did was wrong. Now you do. 3 months ago, you would have argued that you weren't racist. Now you can acknowledge your biases. That's progress. But I still have so far to go, Margaret said. We all do, Jiwon said. I'm still learning too. This work never really ends. We just keep trying to do better. Margaret's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and saw a message from Daniel. The bank's board of directors wanted a presentation about the diversity initiative. They were considering expanding it to all branches nationwide. The board wants to see results, Margaret said, showing Jiwon the message. Then we'll show them results, Jiwon said. Not just numbers, but stories. Real examples of how things have changed. Can you arrange for some of the entrepreneurs we've helped to speak? That's a great idea, Margaret said, making notes. They spent the next hour planning the presentation. Margaret was nervous about speaking to the board, but Jiwon coached her through it. Speak from the heart, Jiwon advised. Tell them your story. Tell them what you've learned. People connect with honesty. As they finished their meeting, Margaret gathered her papers. Jiwon, she said, I want you to know that this experience has changed my life. I know that sounds dramatic, but it's true. I was sleepwalking through my career, going through the motions. Now I feel like I'm actually making a difference. You are making a difference, Jiwon said. I see it in the reports. I hear it in the feedback. You're doing good work. Margaret smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. I'm trying, and I'm not going to stop trying. They left the coffee shop together. Outside, the autumn sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Margaret headed back to the bank to prepare for the board presentation. Jiwon walked toward the parking garage where her car was parked. As Jiwon walked, she thought about the past 3 months. The decision to give Margaret a second chance had been a gamble. Some of her friends had thought she was being too generous. Her business partner had worried that she was being naive. But seeing Margaret's transformation, seeing the real change happening at the bank, Jiwon felt confident in her choice. Change was possible. People could grow. Systems could improve. It took work and patience and a willingness to believe in second chances. But it was possible. Jiwon pulled out her phone and made a note. Schedule visit to Youth Entrepreneurship Center. Meet with students. Hear their stories. She wanted to stay connected to why this work mattered. Not just the business side or the numbers, but the real people whose lives were affected by these changes. The next morning, Margaret stood in front of the bank's board of directors. She had prepared carefully, but she was still nervous. These were powerful people. They could decide whether to expand the initiative or shut it down. Daniel introduced her and Margaret stepped up to the podium. She looked out at the serious faces watching her. She took a deep breath and began. 3 months ago, I made the worst mistake of my career. 6 months after that morning in the lobby, First National Bank looked almost the same from the outside. The same glass doors, the same marble floors, the same tall pillars. But inside, where it mattered, everything had changed. Margaret stood in the lobby on a Tuesday morning watching the flow of customers. She had started doing this once a week, just observing, paying attention to details she never noticed before. How employees greeted people, who they smiled at, who they watched with suspicious eyes, who they helped quickly and who they made wait. Today, she saw a young black man in a basketball jersey approach the information desk. The employee, a woman named Sandra, smiled warmly and asked how she could help. 6 months ago, that same employee might have been cold or dismissive. Margaret knew because Sandra had struggled during the early training sessions. She had insisted she did not see color, that she treated everyone the same. It took weeks for her to recognize her own biases. Now Sandra was one of the program's biggest supporters. She had even volunteered to mentor young people at the Youth Entrepreneurship Center. Margaret's phone buzzed. It was a reminder about today's special event. At 10 o'clock, the bank would officially announce the expansion of its diversity initiative to all 50 branches nationwide. The board had been so impressed with the results that they wanted to make it company-wide. Local news stations would be there. Community leaders had been invited. It was a big moment, but Margaret felt nervous. She would have to speak publicly about her mistake, about how she had treated Jiwon that morning. The story would be in the news. Her face would be on television. Everyone would know what she had done. "Are you ready?" a voice asked behind her. Margaret turned to see Jiwon approaching. She was dressed in a sharp business suit today. Her hair was styled professionally. She looked like the photo Daniel had in his file 6 months ago. But Margaret knew her better now. She knew Jiwon still preferred jeans and hoodies when she was not at formal events. She knew Jiwon worked 16-hour days. She knew Jiwon donated millions to causes supporting young entrepreneurs of color. "I'm terrified," Margaret admitted honestly. "Good," Jiwon said with a slight smile. "Terror means you understand what's at stake." They walked together to the conference room where the announcement would take place. Chairs had been set up for about 50 people. Camera crews were testing their equipment. Daniel was in the corner, adjusting his tie nervously. This was his big moment, too. Under his leadership, First National had become a model for inclusive banking. Over the next 20 minutes, the room filled with people. Margaret recognized community leaders she had met through the program. Young entrepreneurs who had received support from the bank employees who had participated in the training, representatives from the 3 partner organizations. And in the back, sitting quietly, Margaret's husband and 2 children. She had not told them they were coming. Seeing them made her eyes water. Daniel stepped up to the podium at exactly 10 o'clock. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. 6 months ago, First National Bank made a commitment to change. We recognized that we could do better in serving all members of our community. Today, I'm proud to announce that our Diversity and Inclusion Initiative has been so successful that we're expanding it to all 50 of our branches across the state." Applause filled the room. Cameras flashed. Daniel continued. "This initiative has resulted in a 40% increase in accounts from minority-owned businesses. Customer satisfaction in underserved communities has improved by 35%. We've provided free financial education to over 200 young entrepreneurs, and we've created partnerships with 15 community organizations." More applause. Daniel waited for it to quiet down. "But numbers don't tell the whole story," he said. "Real change comes from people willing to do the hard work of examining themselves and growing. I'd like to invite Margaret Chen, the director of our diversity initiative, to share her experience. Margaret's legs felt weak as she stood up. She walked to the podium on shaky legs. Looking out at all those faces watching her was terrifying. But then she found her husband's eyes. He nodded encouragingly. "Good morning," Margaret said. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. "My name is Margaret Chen. 6 months ago, I was a senior bank employee who thought I was doing a good job. I showed up on time. I followed the rules. I helped customers. I had never been written up or complained about." She paused. "And then one morning, a young black woman walked through those doors wearing jeans and carrying an old backpack. Within minutes, I had decided she was suspicious. I questioned her. I doubted her. And I called security to have her removed." The room was silent. Some people already knew this story, but hearing Margaret tell it herself was powerful. It turned out that young woman was Jiwon Park, one of the most successful tech entrepreneurs in the country. She was here to invest $55 million in our bank. But that's not why my actions were wrong. My actions were wrong because I treated a human being as a threat, based solely on her appearance. I would have been wrong even if she had been anyone else. Margaret felt tears in her eyes but kept going. "I didn't think I was a racist person. I had all the usual defenses. I had friends from different backgrounds. I voted a certain way. I considered myself open-minded. But when tested, when faced with someone who didn't fit my narrow idea of what an investor should look like, I failed." She looked at Jiwon, who sat in the front row. Jiwon Park had every right to have me fired. Instead, she gave me a chance to learn and grow. She asked me to lead this diversity initiative. At first, I didn't understand why. It seemed like a strange punishment, but now I know it was a gift. Margaret's voice grew stronger. "Over the past 6 months, I've learned more than in my entire 15 years at this bank. I've learned about unconscious bias and how it shapes everything we do. I've learned about privilege and how it blinds us to others' struggles. I've learned that good intentions don't matter if they lead to harmful actions. And I've learned that change is possible, but only if we're willing to be uncomfortable." She clicked to a slide showing photos from the past 6 months. Training sessions, community events, young entrepreneurs receiving support. This initiative has changed our bank. But more importantly, it's changed the people who work here. We're more aware, more thoughtful, more committed to serving everyone with respect and dignity. Another slide showed testimonials from customers. "For the first time, I felt like the bank saw me as a real business owner," Margaret read. "The employees here treat me with respect, not suspicion. My daughter wants to start a business, and First National gave her the guidance and resources to make it happen." Margaret looked back at the audience. "These are the voices that matter, not the numbers or the awards or the good publicity. These real people whose lives are better because we decided to change. That's what this initiative is about." She took a deep breath. "I want to be clear about something. This work is not finished. 6 months of training doesn't erase decades of bias. We still have employees who resist change. We still have customers who experience discrimination. We still have a long way to go. But we're committed to the journey." Applause began, growing louder. Margaret stepped away from the podium, feeling exhausted and relieved. She had told her story. She had been honest. Now everyone knew Jiwon was next to speak. She walked to the podium with confidence. "Thank you, Margaret, for your honesty and your hard work. 6 months ago, I walked into this bank expecting a simple business meeting. Instead, I experienced discrimination that I've faced countless times throughout my life. But that morning led to something unexpected. It led to real change." She clicked to a new slide showing statistics about diversity in banking nationally. The banking industry has a diversity problem. Black business owners are 3 times more likely to be denied loans than white business owners with identical credit scores. Young entrepreneurs from minority backgrounds report feeling unwelcome and disrespected in traditional banking spaces. This isn't just wrong morally, it's bad business. Banks that fail to serve diverse communities are missing out on billions of dollars in potential growth. Another slide showed First National's results. In 6 months, this bank has proven that change is profitable. They've gained hundreds of new business accounts. They've increased customer loyalty. They've improved their reputation in the community. And they've created a model that other banks can follow. Jiwon looked directly at the cameras. "I'm challenging every bank in this state, every bank in this country, to do what First National has done. Don't wait for a public incident. Don't wait until someone threatens to sue you. Start now. Examine your biases. Train your employees. Partner with your community. It's the right thing to do and it's good business. The room erupted in applause. Ji-won stepped back from the podium and gestured for Margaret to join her. They stood together as cameras flashed. 6 months ago, they were strangers thrown together by conflict. Now they were partners in change. After the formal presentation, the room broke into smaller conversations. Margaret found herself surrounded by people asking questions. Other bank employees wanted to know how to start similar programs at their institutions. Community leaders thanked her for the partnership and support. Young entrepreneurs shared stories about how the bank had helped them. A young black woman, maybe 19 years old, approached Margaret shyly. "Mrs. Chen," she said, "I just wanted to thank you. What's your name?" Margaret asked. "Destiny," the young woman said. "I went through the financial education program you set up. And last week, First National approved my loan application. I'm opening a hair salon." Margaret felt her eyes filling with tears again. "That's wonderful, Destiny. Congratulations." "The thing is," Destiny said, 6 months ago I tried to get a loan from another bank. They treated me like I was wasting their time. They looked at me like I was trying to scam them. It made me feel so small. But here at First National, I was treated with respect. The loan officer actually listened to my business plan. She gave me advice on how to improve it. She treated me like a real business person. She paused, then added, "I heard about what happened to Ms. Park, about how you treated her at first, and I heard about how you changed. That gives me hope. Because if you can change, maybe other people can too." Margaret could not speak for a moment. She just nodded and squeezed Destiny's hand. Across the room, Ji-won was talking with Daniel and the board members. "The expansion to all branches will require significant resources," one board member said. "But we believe it's worth the investment." "It is," Ji-won confirmed. "And Next-Gen Solutions will provide additional support. We're developing a training module specifically for banking institutions. First National will be the first to use it and will make it available to other banks at cost." Daniel looked pleased. "This partnership has exceeded all our expectations. You've not only invested in our technology, but in our people and our community." "That's what good investment looks like," Ji-won said. "Money is just numbers. Real value comes from positive change that lasts." As the event wound down and people began to leave, Margaret found herself standing in the lobby again. Ji-won came to stand beside her. "6 months," Margaret said. "It feels like 6 years. You've done good work," Ji-won said. "You should be proud." "I am," Margaret admitted. "But I'm also aware of how much I didn't know. How blind I was. I keep wondering how many other people I hurt over the years without even realizing it." "You can't change the past," Ji-won said. "You can only change the future. And that's what you're doing." They stood in comfortable silence watching the bank operate. Employees helping customers with patience and respect. A diverse group of people feeling welcome and valued. It was such a simple thing, really. Treating everyone with basic human dignity. But apparently it required constant work and attention. "What's next for you?" Margaret asked. "I'm opening a new office in Chicago," Ji-won said. "Expanding the business. But I'll be back regularly to check on the program here. This is important to me." "It's important to me too," Margaret said. "This has become more than a job. It's a calling," Ji-won smiled. "Good. The world needs more people who see it as a calling." A teenage boy entered the bank looking nervous. He wore a high school letterman jacket and carried a folder. He approached the information desk hesitantly. Margaret watched. The employee greeted him warmly and asked how she could help. The boy explained that he wanted to learn about small business loans. The employee didn't dismiss him or treat him like he was wasting her time. Instead, she called over a loan officer who specialized in working with young entrepreneurs. "That's what change looks like," Ji-won said quietly, nodding toward the interaction. Margaret felt a surge of pride. That was her work, her program, her commitment to making things better. 6 months ago, that boy might have been treated with suspicion. Today, he was being treated with respect. "Thank you," Margaret said suddenly, turning to Ji-won, "for believing I could change, for giving me this opportunity, for not giving up on me when I gave you every reason to." "Thank you for doing the work," Ji-won replied. "A lot of people would have taken the easy way out. You chose the hard path. That takes courage." They shook hands, a gesture that felt formal but meaningful. Then impulsively, Margaret pulled Ji-won into a brief hug. "I won't let you down," she promised. "I know." Ji-won said. As Ji-won left the bank, she passed the spot where she had stood 6 months ago, being questioned and doubted and treated like a threat. She paused for just a moment, remembering. Then she pushed through the glass doors and stepped into the autumn sunshine. Behind her, First National Bank continued its business. Employees helped customers. Money was exchanged. Loans were approved. But beneath all the ordinary banking activities, something extraordinary was happening. People were learning, growing, changing. And slowly, one interaction at a time, they were building a more inclusive and fair institution. Margaret returned to her office on the second floor. She had 3 training sessions to lead this week.
A meeting with new community partners on Thursday.
A consultation with another bank interested in starting a similar program. The work never stopped. But for the first time in her career, she felt truly alive. She opened her computer and began planning the next phase of the initiative. There was so much more to do, so many more people to reach, so many more minds to open. But she was ready. She had learned that change was possible. She had learned that people could grow. Most importantly, she had learned that one person's courage to admit their mistakes could create ripples that spread far beyond what they ever imagined. Outside her window, the city continued its busy rhythm. People hurried along sidewalks. Cars moved through streets. Life went on. But in this one bank, in this one corner of the city, something had shifted. A young black woman in a hoodie had walked through a door and changed everything. Not with anger or revenge, but with the radical belief that people deserved second chances. That understanding was more powerful than punishment. That transformation was possible, and she was right.